presenter is Dr. Manuel Castro Berman, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Jefferson Project at Lake George currently. Previously, he is from Argentina. He received his bachelor in ecology at the National University of La Plata, Argentina, and then he pursued his PhD in molecular biology and biotechnology at the National University of San Martin, Argentina, studying the effects of agricultural activities on freshwater cyanobacteria. And as I mentioned, currently he's working at a postdoc as a Jefferson Project, where he's studying molecular tools using such as DNA sequencing to characterize the microbiome and cyanobacteria blooms of natural systems like Lake George. So with that, I welcome you, Manuel, to the Limnoseries, and I hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you, the GSA, for hosting me. Well, I'm Manuel, and I'll be talking about emerging pollutants and pesticide impacts on freshwater systems in Latin America. I'll be focusing mostly or exclusively on pesticide impacts. This is a very broad topic that can be approached from very different angles, ranging from pure chemistry to social concerns to human and ecosystem health, economic development. So I'm going to try to touch a little bit of those matters, but I'll be focused on freshwater ecosystems. Okay, so there's no way around this. We have to start with some definitions. So according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, a pesticide is any substance or mixture that is intended to combat any pest during the production, storage, transport, distribution, and processing of food, agricultural products, or any other animal feed. A good way to, or a practical way to characterize them is based on their target organism. And among the many, there are three that stand out. There are fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides to combat fungi, weed, and insects, respectively. So probably you are aware of the concept of planetary boundaries, which are processes, which are 9 processes that together they maintain the stability and resilience of the planet Earth. These processes are interconnected and are critical for sustaining human development in the planet. There are some which are core planetary boundaries, core processes such as climate change or biosphere integrity, and pesticides are part of one of these processes, which is novel entities, which are manufactured chemicals or engineered materials, or even natural elements that are enriched by humans, such as radioactive elements, and then are released at high rates by human activities. They are a mark of the Anthropocene, but their full effects on the Earth system are largely unknown. For instance, many of these entities were released unregulated, leading to unforeseen consequences such as the pesticides DDT or CFCs in the ozone layer. The chemical release often outspaced the global monitoring and assessment capacities, and despite the environmental movements, synthetic chemical pollution is largely ignored in global change analysis. While the rate of increase in the production and diversification of pharmaceuticals or global pesticides exceed most of previous agents of global change, such as biodiversity loss or agricultural transformation, and even are similar to those of nitrogen fertilization, there is little information about their occurrence in the environment. And most of we know about its occurrence comes from market estimations of land use data. So in the left panel, despite this rapid proliferation in total amount, diversity, and target toxicity, the literature has remained stagnant for decades. In this case, this figure is showing the total publications and proportion, including terms associated with driver to global change in the top 20 ecology journals. And you can see synthetic chemicals have been stagnant for the last 20 years. The same thing goes here, where the NSF grant a relatively smaller proportion of grants to those proposals that include synthetic chemicals as their subject, as opposed to other terms such as climate change or nitrogen. But the increase in the amount of pesticides is an outcome of another planetary boundary, which is the conversion of land, and particularly the conversion of natural land to agricultural land, which is a major driver of global biodiversity loss, which is another planetary boundary which is being affected. And almost 80% of recent global land use change impacts were associated with increase of agri-food exports from Latin America, Africa, and the Southeast Asia. In the case of Latin America, there was an exponential increase in areas devoted solely to monocultures in areas like Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil. Brazil also suffers from deforestation of their forests to produce beef. And the case of Mexico, land use changes have been associated with exports to and consumption to the United States. Latin America produces around 13% of the global agricultural exports. Their crop production is less diversified than in other regions, as their top 10 products account for over half of the exports. Basically, there are two models in Latin America. The one that it's including North America, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and countries from the Andean regions such as Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and Venezuela, where their agriculture relies on a smallholding farming. They have little financial aid and low yields of production. They utilize around 10% of the pesticide on the region. On the other hand, in the southern cone, countries like Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, regions of Bolivia and Argentina, they are highly mechanized and they are capital intensive, and they utilize around 90% of the pesticides in the region. I'm going to focus on that particular model, as it is the one that consumes the most of these products. So this model has three pillars. First one is the genetically modified organisms and the adoption of these GMOs. In this bar plot, it is the global adoption rates for the principal GMO products at global level. If we zoom in one of the 5 countries that use the most of these GMO, which are Brazil, Argentina, the US, Canada, and India, we'll see similar trends. After the first modification event was approved, there was a sharp increase into the adoption of GMOs. And in this case, for soybean, over 90% of what was being cropped in Brazil was GMO soybean. This bar plot is showing the number of modification events approved per year in this case in Brazil, per crop. And most of these modifications are associated to some type of herbicide tolerance or a herbicide tolerance plus an insect resistance. This takes us to the second pillar, which is the adoption or the consumption of the use of pesticides that for which these crops are tolerant. This graph is showing the agricultural use of pesticides in the different type of pesticide, by the different type of pesticide in Latin America between 1990 and 2021. As you can see, there was an exponential increase, and particularly for herbicides in which glyphosate is the most represent over 50% of what is commercialized. Finally, mechanical and digital technology played a crucial role in the adoption of these type of varieties, and will play a crucial role in the future where more technology is going to. In the center of that discussion, which is current, is relevant, and is very heated, there is another part that is that on the table, it is global food security. So we got these two big parties in dispute.
Oh,
Okay,
okay, good.
thank you. So if the pesticide does not reach the target organism, we can expect a primary drift or secondary and third degree drift as well. It can be sorted and then through runoff processes reach water system, or it can leach to groundwaters. So priority number one is human health, and pesticide residues have been found in fruits and vegetables in the Argentinian domestic market in metropolitan areas. So in these goods, they found over 30% of these goods had pesticide residue levels over the maximum residue limit proposed by the legislation. And these were crops that were ready to be consumed. A similar study was conducted in Brazil, where they found different residues at ppm concentrations in a wide variety of goods. They analyzed around a time frame of 20 years, 36,000 samples, which is around what the EU analyzed in 1 year. Some of the pesticides were forbidden in the United States and the European Union. But this is not just a problem or an issue in South America, as a worldwide survey of neonicotinoids in honey showed that the pesticide was present in samples from the 6 continents, showing that first that the food was contaminated, and also showing that the bees were being exposed to such pesticides through their food sources. Glyphosate AMPA has been found in window material in Argentina in concentrations that were 60 times richer than the original soil. It's also been found in respirable dust, on pavement roads in Argentina as well. even in rainfall, in areas where there was no agriculture being developed. So communities, people are being exposed, and particularly those that in regions like Latin America, where there is big inequality, and there are communities that live pretty much in isolation and are vulnerable communities, usually living in rural environments, they are exposed to these type of chemicals. And events and news like two I'm showing here are everywhere. In this case, Paraguay was violating indigenous right to safe foods and safe environment, and the UN ruled a series of recommendations from the Paraguayan government. This was a litigious situation that took 10 years for the UN to get to this landmark decision. And in Brazil, there are similar situations where rural people are being sprayed with pesticides. And this is a quote from a teacher, a 20-year-old teacher in northern Brazil, in Bahia. She was, and I quote, the plane was spraying next to the school, and the wind was bringing the product toward us. Even though we couldn't smell it, we could feel the wind that was coming into the window. The kids, aged 4 and 7, were complaining that their eyes and gums were itching. People can be exposed to the wind, but also through their water sources. And this is some news that are repeated across the continent, where they had found pesticide levels 40 times superior of what is permitted in the European Union, in Argentina, and also in Costa Rica. In Brazil, they found pesticides in drinking water of 28 cities. Argentina again. In Uruguay, they find glyphosate and 27 pesticides in drinking water, and where the governmental company has a water intake. So, but this is not just news, and there are reports and also white papers that has addressed this issue. And the first show you, which was carried out by Dr. Donna, where they survey or they make a review on the pesticide occurrence in aquifers from Latin America. Their first study was in 1998, and this is the time frame from 1998 to 2020. They find 28 studies that were reporting some type of pesticide in groundwater, and they found it in just 6 countries: Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Uruguay, and República Dominicana. They also observed that there were countries with large amount of pesticide consumption that had no report whatsoever. They found 70 different pesticides in this literature review, and they reported that 40% of the detections included banned and legacy pesticides such as DDT and endosulfan. While the legacy pesticide hits in the literature were lowering through time, they still find it in recent literature, showing that those were recent applications and also historical residues. Between the contemporary pesticide that they found in the literature, they observed the glyphosate, they reported glyphosate and metolachlor, but also atrazine, which has been banned in the European Union since early 2000. As expected, the highest detection frequencies were observed in agricultural areas. Less than half of those studies were mentioning any local drinking water guidelines. And when they were always below that limit. But when they were mentioning international guidelines, they were always exceeding that limit. Something I find interesting in this review was that the authors conducted a questionnaire to the original authors of these 48 studies, and they asked them about which were the main limitations that they see for conducting this type of research. And they pointed out that there was human resources, or the lack of human resources, instrumental obsolescence, and low resolution equipment are the main factors limiting this type of study. In a similar note, Doctora Pizarro from Argentina assembled a team from researchers from Argentina and Uruguay to conduct a review on the freshwater ecosystem in Latin America. We will be focusing on, in which I'm also a co-author of this paper. So that's what I'm going to talking with. Anyway, we focus on pesticide contamination in freshwater ecosystems. We provided an up-to-date overview of research volumes and characteristics. We identified trends, gaps, and strengths in local scientific knowledge. And we also highlighted local social and ecosystem particularities of the region. It was our study region. We selected 51 territorial entities, including sovereign states, dependent territories, and overseas department. In this literature review, we identified over 200 studies, and we also try to provide a comprehensive and exploratory overview, trends, specific, and volumes of pesticide use in Latin America, and try to correlate these two variables. Well, we did a document characterization of these studies, including basic data, the system type, environmental compartment, the detection methodologies employed, which were the research objectives, and which were the specific pesticide and their concentration they detected. The first thing we noticed was that there was a lack of data, particularly in terms of, and specifically in this case, for pesticide estimations. We found estimations for 31 out of 51 of the territorial entities we observed. And from those we got data, we found that there was a sharp increase in pesticide use in this 30-year-old frame. And the average increase in pesticide per year per country was around 400%. In the area we observed, in this region, we observed the highest application per area in the world, and Ecuador was leading with almost 14 kilograms per hectare. In Argentina, they use around 5, and I think the US, they use around 3, just to have a notion. Among the pesticides being used, in Brazil, around 33% of what is of the registered pesticides are not authorized for sale in the European Union. The European Union is the largest market in the world, and in many cases, they are producing pesticides that are exported to regions like Africa, Southeast Asia, or Latin America, where they are used, and then they might come back. They have the potential to come back to Europe as residue in those goods. In Peru and Mexico, the percentage of banned pesticides in the European Union that are currently used exceeded the 50%. So we observe a slow increase in the publications per year, and we assess that this time lag could be between the public concerns and the scientific response, the lack of established protocols and acquisition of equipment to measure these pesticides in complex matrix like sediments or water. We focus almost exclusively in inland waters, but we include a few marine environments of underrepresented countries such as Cuba, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica. And most of the studies were reporting values in rivers and streams. We also observe here a gap in scientific research. There was information just for 50% of the countries, and this gap was significant at the Caribbean islands. In the studies, there were just 3 studies focused on transnational level, and we also included 3 from Antarctica, which was outside of our defined region, but to show that pesticides can have long-range transport and be found in such isolated environments. We also observed that the largest economies within each subregion were the ones that were producing the most literature, such as Mexico and Costa Rica in North and Central America, and Argentina and Brazil in South America. When we zoom in and try to connect the amount of pesticide these economies were using and the number of publications they were producing per year, we observed that there was no direct connection. As for instance, Brazil has an exponential increase in pesticide, but their publications are very sparse and are significantly smaller than in Argentina. The same case, Mexico doubles the use of pesticides and has of Costa Rica, and they have similar number of publications. Again, the lack of analytical instrumentation and human resources hinders our capacities to assess any type of pesticide impact on freshwater ecosystem. There is a big disparity of the magnitude of what is being used and what is being produced in terms of scientific research. But in that regard, pesticide has always, or most of the research that involves pesticides has reported declines in biodiversity, and its neonicotinoids, for instance, have been are one of the proposed agents of declining bird biodiversity in the United States, and they have also been proposed as the reason why grassland butterfly are declining in Europe, and the same thing with flying insect biomass, in this case in protected areas. It's been proposed that entonofauna declines can be attributed to intensive agriculture and pesticides, and in South America, amphibians population declines have been also been associated with agriculture and aquaculture. But sometimes you can have some unexpected results, such as the ones that were led by Dr. Zagarese, which was my advisor during my doctoral studies in Argentina, where he proposed in an experimental setting to assess the effect of a commonly used glyphosate-based pesticide, which was Roundup, on natural freshwater microbial communities. They applied the herbicide in a mesocosm setting, and one of the most remarkable results from this study was that they observed a 40-fold increase in phycocyanobacteria in plankton, and also an increase of cyanobacteria after the addition of glyphosate. So phycocyanobacteria are ubiquitous organisms that occur in marine environments and are represented by Prochlorococcus, and in freshwater environments. And in the Pampean region in Argentina, the grassland, it's been reported that phycocyanobacteria has the highest abundances in the world, and have significantly higher abundances than other lakes with similar trophic conditions, status. So the idea here was to, Horacio, Dr. Zagarese's idea was to try to find field evidence if what is occurring in this experimental setting can be occurring in natural systems. So for that, we designed a large-scale surveys, including areas that were impacted by this herbicide. We chose like 52 lakes from the Pampa region and lakes from the Patagonian region that have similar trophic status in areas where there were no agricultural activity. So our first step was to assess whether glyphosate was a contaminant of fresh water. Well, we found out it was present in this freshwater ecosystem. For our surprise, this was the first study that was assessing glyphosate in lakes in South America. Then we'll try to find out whether the pesticide concentration found in water could explain the phycocyanobacteria abundance patterns we observed in the same sample. But the occurrence of a pesticide, and particularly glyphosate, in natural system is very unpredictable. And you end up with a data set of a lot of zeros. That is very difficult to assess any type of statistical analysis. So in that same survey, we also collected samples to do eDNA and to assess the presence of glyphosate degrading genes. And also we conducted a land use land cover characterization of all those lakes. And when we included those two variables that can be used as indicators of glyphosate impact, we observed that they were explaining a large variation of the phycocyanobacteria abundance. We proposed some possible scenarios, one based on the presence of these genes and also in the proportion of intensive agriculture surrounding those lakes. And we found that a difference of 22 times between the least impacted scenario, where there were no intensive agriculture and no genes associated to glyphosate degradation, to the worst case scenario where genes were present and the proportion of intensive agriculture was maximum. In that same survey, we also collected samples to do phytoplankton counts, bacterial estimations. We also did physical chemical variables as well. And all those variables in lakes where they show in glyphosate impact, we also observe higher turbidity, change in the size structure of the phytoplankton community towards small sized organisms, higher biomass of cyanobacteria, higher phycocyanobacteria, and decreased levels of diversity indices of green algae. While these type of studies are very interesting, relevant, and they show actual impacts of this production system into natural system, they are a snapshot in a given time to answer a given question. And this is where the need to monitor these lakes is very relevant. And the establishment of monitoring programs is relevant in this region. And in Latin America, so in this map is showing the monitoring programs that are ongoing. In green, those that have some type of activity started or pilot project. Well, others in blue, those that have some kind of interest in conducting those, and in gray, those that there's no information. As you can see in Latin America, most countries have started some type of activity or pilot project, because there is a need to have organized, protocolized and standardized and acquire in a synchronic way of the levels of agrochemicals in this region. For instance, in the case of Argentina, technical scientific reports are use this type of literature to assess the impact of in this case, the atrazine. But there are no current monitoring programs ongoing that are actively collecting samples. But in this case, there was presented one project to start this monitoring in 3 of the main agricultural provinces in Argentina, led by Karina Miglioranza, where they want to assess residues in soil, water, sediments, and biota. And there are institute and scientific institutions interested in and involved in this monitoring. In Mexico, there are similar situations where, for instance, in this case, the Human Rights Commission issued a recommendation to assess if there were any violations of human rights to food, safe water and health environment in Mexico, and they basically base their recommendation based on scientific studies and reports rather than actual data being collected. In Brazil, there was a pilot project to monitor 8 sites in Brazil in 3 times, where they analyzed around almost 500 samples. And they end up emphasizing the need of ongoing environmental surveillance, pesticides in water. But this is from 2019, the last update. In Uruguay, there are ongoing monitoring programs. There are 21 actually, where they've been collecting over 2,000 samples from 2023 to 2024, and they are collecting organically compounds, including pesticides. And this is some of the pesticides, and I found it very nice or interesting that they were collecting samples to glyphosate residue analysis. And Chile is the country that has the most information in this regard. They've been publishing bulletins and data from 2015 on air and water, including pesticide emission. But if we compare that to what is done in Europe, well, there is a lot to be done. For instance, in this study, they use European databases, and they end up with a data set of over 40 countries, over 40 years of data collections, and there were almost 15 million pesticide measures in over 17,000 different sampling sites. This type of monitoring allows you then to conduct this type of maps to identify hotspots, in this case for atrazine contamination in groundwater, and to assess whether your legislation, if you're changing the legislation, is actually working. So in Latin America, there are limitations as most of what is known in this type of reports is based on reviews or scientific studies that do not provide a complete picture of the pesticide pollution in freshwater system at the regional level. So monitoring data is essential to assess chemical pollution in time and space. And well, again, as the data is so sparse, there are difficulties in interpreting this data. And there is a need for policy information. There is insufficient data to develop effective local policies and strategies for reducing and managing chemical pollution in aquatic systems. Despite this, there are some steps in that direction. For instance, in Argentina, scientists are encouraged to align their research with social demands within the national scientific system. And there are priority research areas that are defined in national plans. Mexico, for instance, is the first country in the region to start a complete ban of glyphosate and transgenic crops cultivation by 2024. This was postponed. Brazil is shifting the policy in terms of pesticides, to trying to reduce the use of pesticides and promoting agroecology after the previous administration that has a completely different policy. So we observed that there are monitoring and reporting gaps. Reports availability is limited, and many records are scarce or outdated. And there is a need for research and investment, where nearly half of Latin American countries lack academic research on pesticide impacts. And one solution to this could be collaboration between regional academic partnerships. Finally, there are many suggestions, approaches to try to tackle this problem, from research and development, education, policies that are outlined in recommendations by the FAO and other similar organizations. And with that, I would like to thank Leon for this opportunity, the Jefferson Project, and my current university where I work, and CONICET, which is the National Scientific Council from Argentina, and INTECH, which is the institute where I conducted most of the research I show you on the effect of glyphosate on phytocyanobacteria. And with that, I will take questions.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for the very detailed presentation. Do we have any questions from the audience, Manuel?